Hello and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. What does Gothic actually mean? Does it just mean dark and gloomy, or is there something more to it? I don't know, but whatever the case, the same question can be regarded with Gothic music, Gothic rock in particular. Some people out there may think of like alt, kind of almost emo-ish bands like My Chemical Romance or Evanescence or Good Charlotte. Not that any of them are bad, just not exactly fitting of such labels. However, there are still actual legit goth rock bands out there. Bauhaus, Susie and the Banshees, Joy Division, and of course, what we're looking at today, The Cure. Fronted by Robert Smith, they can be probably seen as a prime example of gothic rock and post-punk music of the 70s and the 80s. And we're looking at one of their early albums today, simply titled Faith. Released back in 1981, about 40 years ago, this album divided a couple of critics at the time of its release. Some thought it was a good album that demonstrated the styles of The Cure. Others thought it was a bit too gloomy for any good, even for the band itself. But let's take a look at it for us, take a listen to it ourselves, and see if it still holds up. We begin the album with The Holy Hour. Right off the bat, this song definitely sets the tone and mood for the album. This thick, rumbly bass that carries on the course of this song alone definitely gives off that deep, foreboding feeling. And some of its lyrics are also just as enigmatic. Some references such as about waiting in silence as people slip away, empty bodies kissing the ground and praying. It's almost a bit of like a religious song in a way, or at least it kind of subverts and deconstructs not just Christianity but religion as a whole, really. How we have faith that after we die we will be rewarded or for our virtues or punished for our sins. Well, is that all really true though? Is that really all worth it? Is there really truly an afterlife? We don't entirely know, and I do like songs that make you think. I do like songs that make you wonder and make you question your perception of not just reality but life, your beliefs, and your just your way of life. Really, I like it when it helps engage the listeners. Next is Primary, the only single of the album. This song's more punkish in nature, but while still delivering the themes of existentialism from the previous track. And ironically enough, this song has no guitar used in it as whatsoever. It's all literal drum and bass. There's the regular bass by the bassist of the band Simon Gallup, and there's a six-string bass played by Robert Smith himself. And yet it still sounds like a very low-pitched guitar, and I don't know if it's what the techniques they played in the actual recording, or it's some kind of mixing technique they used in post. I gotta say, I'm generally impressed by that particular song. That's very impressive. Lyrically, it addresses the idealized innocence of younger people and children, and how it contrasts in some way with the wiser, more experienced, more brutalized of older and elder people in general. It also seems in some way like a love song that's where the person singing wants to commit to a person but still feels that existential crisis, and how it fears it could get in the way of their relationship. I And I think that's a very interesting and pretty neat concept, especially for a goth punk song in a way. Next is Other Voices, beginning with a drum beat that definitely reminds me a bit of Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush. The song also has a gritty bass riff that also feels reminiscent of Dance Dance by Fall Out Boy, which I have to wonder if Fall Out Boy was in some way influenced by The Cure. But anyways, its lyrics do also feel more like a love song in a way, or an an unrequited love song, if that's the right term for it. Robert sings out these feelings to this person who, if one might interpret, may not exist. The perfect person may or may not even exist. And I think that's very interesting when you look at it. I mean, we all have our preconceptions of love and our predetermined ideas of what a perfect person or the Mr. Right or Miss Right may look like to us, how they may sound, act, and all that. But then something like this comes on to tell us that whoever or whatever you imagine that the perfect person you want to have, they may not exist, or they may be very hard to find, or you're not looking in the right places to find them. And that's something I think a lot of people can definitely relate to. Then we have the last song of side one, All Cats Are Grey. Despite being one of the longer songs of the album, clocking about 5.5 minutes, it has, strangely enough, very few lyrics, like at least a few verses or so. Most of it is just the music itself, and yet in some ways complements the lyrics, or the lyrics complement music, kind of, but all complement into one. The very few lyrics we have paint this this gloomy and almost bleak image of this lonely single person trapped under this cave or cavern, no way in, no way out, trapped, almost starved and dying and deprived of air and water and food. It almost seems metaphorical in a way. The feeling of being stuck in one place, unable to go anywhere or escape anywhere. The the low thick bass and the echoey reverberated drum beats and all those knocky tappy sounds really do complement the feeling and sensation of being alienated and isolated from all else. And the way it all ends in those sudden yet haunting piano tappings, it just really settles, or rather unsettles. It really does feel like the lowest of of the tone and mood of this album. It really does complement that inner darkness in a way. And it does do well at concluding the first side before continuing to the second side, which begins with The Funeral Party. Death. This one's more synth heavy in a way, in that it puts more emphasis on keyboard and synthesizers as opposed to a guitar and all that. However, despite that, it still comes across that somewhat dark and bleak and morbid atmosphere that most of the album, if not all the album, has managed to get across. It's in a way a funeral march. Its lyrics kind of deal with the passing of relatives, grandparents, parents, and eventually yourself. You really do feel that sense of anxiety in Robert Smith's voice alone. and the synth and the guitar and that echoey drums really do help in complementing that kind of that feeling he was trying to get across, and they accomplished it quite well. In fact, we all have we all have people who are going to pass away someday, and it's hard to cope with, but it's still true. That then segues strangely well to the next song, simply called Doubt. Much like Primary, this is definitely more of a punkier kind of song, albeit more passive aggressive in a way, both its music and its lyrics. It seems to deal with trying to not just doubting yourself and other people, but also trying to let go of other people. The things, letting go of your obsessions, even if you have to figuratively kill them. The recurring phrase of knowing I'll murder you again. It may not be literal, but rather that you're just trying to get these memories, these people, these obstacles out of your head and just not think about it. And if you're reminded of it again, you'll just try to block it out again or murder it again, as the song may have you know. Robert Smith did very well with the lyric, with not only lyrics he sung, but also how he sung it. He does give off that feeling of frustration and almost anger in his vocals alone, as well as some of the lines he sings, like "kiss your eyes and finish your life," almost contradicting between loving and hating a person, and whether or not you should just cut them out of your life entirely. It almost feels like the theme of an old 80s psychological horror film or psychological thriller, if you get what I mean. Then we have the penultimate song, The Drowning Man. This, along with a previous song called Cats Are Grey, are apparently inspired by a series of novels by Mervyn Peake called Gormenghast, which none of which I have read, but I've heard some interesting things about. Nonetheless, the music and lyrics of this song are just as enigmatic and dark as the rest. This one deals with some way a metaphorical suicide of a character, feeling being trapped in a frozen environment or a sea of water, and being figuratively and literally drowning in so much conflict and inner demons and all that. Do you really feel the sense of pressure and paranoia and despair with the song, both its music and its lyrics, with such phrases as "the memories fade and leave her eyes," "the water bows for Caesar and drowns at ease." It's not exact. It doesn't make you. I mean, it wouldn't make you want to kill yourself, but it would make you feel hopeless. That's the word to describe a good chunk of the album. Hopeless. And of course it has some good music behind it. The twangy guitars, the synth, and all the drums and bass and all that really come together to complement this dying hope in a way. We then close out the album with the longest song of the album, the self-titled track, Faith. This is what I would almost consider a prog goth song, or a goth prog song, clocking about 6 minutes and 42 seconds. This does culminate a lot of the themes and the tones and moods that the songs before this in this album up to this point have all expressed and given across. The feelings of fears and hope, or the dying thereof, the almost lack thereof. It comes together and gets complemented by both its lyrics and its music. you really do get a bit of an idea of what Robert Smith himself had been going through and experiencing and had been putting up with at his life up to this point and during the time he worked on this album. A lot of a lot of his relatives started passing away up to here, like of course his parents and grandparents and all that. So it does feel natural and understandable why he would harbor these feelings and bring them out through the form of this kind of music, these kind of lyrics, like "The mountain never raises," "Rape me like a child." It's not just for shock value. It kind of feels as if he has these fears that he wants you to know about, but not giving away in your face completely. It lets you think for yourself and decide and figure out what it is you think he's singing about and all that. I really like that. So so in a way, Faith by the Cure is pretty much a decent album from a band of this genre, from The Cure. If you're a big fan of goth music or you want to get into actual goth rock music, I very recommend this. If you're prone to depression and all that, you might think twice before checking it out because it may enhance those negative feelings of yours. However, although it may also help in getting you to relate to people, to relate to the people who wrote this music, who composed it, and so yeah, I definitely recommend this album to any fans of goth rock and to anyone who's a fan of dark, sinister lyrics. Next time, we continue looking at gothic, post-punk, alt-rock albums, with one from Susie and the Banshees.